Hey everybody, and welcome to this second part of the double bill of Kalicube Tuesdays. This is a new monthly roundtable with WordLift. Andrea from WordLift is here today. Welcome everyone. We're going to be talking about content generation at scale for SEO. And I suspect if it's WordLift who are involved in this monthly roundtable, it's always going to be knowledge graphs, semantic SEO, content generation, and generally all that geeky stuff. So Andrea, tell us a little bit about who you are and WordLift.
Hi, so I am Andrea. I am co-founder and CEO of WordLift, and we build knowledge graph, and we do that for automating SEO.
Brilliant, wonderful. And Giovanni, I don't know you from any time before. I think it was three days ago. Tell us a little about yourself. Your second name is Carpinelli, but my eyesight's terrible, so I can't actually read it.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Giovanni. I'm working as a SEO specialist inside the Luxottica performance marketing team. So I'm now here to speak about content generation at scale for SEO, providing my experience on the topic and evaluation that I did together with Andrea and the whole SEO Luxottica team.
Brilliant. I mean, I think everybody's incredibly intrigued by content generation at scale because we think it's this magic pill that will solve all our content problems. And from the other side, looking at Google, thinking maybe Google will figure it out and it'll look like spam. And that's what we're going to be looking in today, is how to do it intelligently, how to work. And as you say, Andrea, with the human in the loop, I think is the fundamental message that will come out of this. So thank you everyone for joining us. I'm in Paris. You two must be in Italy, I would guess. Andrea in Rome and Giovanni in Rome as well?
In Milan.
Oh, in Milan. Oh, excuse me. Oh, yeah. I'm sure there's a fight between Milan and Rome about
always.
glory. So please tell us where you're all from, where you're all listening in from, and we're going to get started with Andrea's presentation, and he's going to explain a little bit about how the approach to using machine learning to generate content at scale. And what I found incredibly interesting when you explained this to me is the approach to how we do it really helps us to understand what it is we're doing, what we're trying to do, where the pitfalls are, and how to do it properly with the human in the loop.
Right. So I will
Off
share
we go.
I don't know if the screen is live.
Yay!
It's live. So I always use Gary Marcus as a starting point because he was among the first one that shed lights on limitation of these foundational models as GPT-3 and T5 and the others have been called. So I usually start with the limitation because then by creating the perimeters, we know what can be done and what cannot be done. So language models are really an approximation of how the language is used rather than, a way of encoding language understanding. And that's a very significant difference that will allow us to understand how we can use them. So, and we know that these language models are at the moment not grounded. And this means that even, someone like Google can make mistakes like the one that we see here where, for a few days at least, looking for Joe Biden, when Google was rewriting the title of the page, he actually picked up an heading which was related to this biography. And so it was presented as vice president rather than the US president. That's pretty bad. But not grounded means that they do not have a way of understanding the facts behind the knowledge that they've been trained on. And as you can see here, it's quite interesting because we see one of the beloved Jason knowledge graph panel. Now we can start calling Jason knowledge graph panel because, of course, he's probably the person in the world that knows most about it. And here we see the difference between the data that's coming from the knowledge graph and then, the text that Google has chosen for representing a web page, and in this case, even replacing, the original title. That's not all. I mean, there are more limitations than this. So they're not grounded. They don't understand what they're talking about, and they cannot count in most cases, at least. So this is DALL-E. This is OpenAI model that has been trained for text to image generation. Hasn't been released to the public. but a few studies emerged where there was this issue. And luckily, I was able to run a test on a counterpart from Russia, which is called ruDALL-E, and has been introduced just a few days ago, maybe 2 or 3 days ago at the most. So we finally have a way of using something similar to DALL-E, which is called ruDALL-E. And so I went on and, with my little understanding of Russian, which is zero, so I went on Google Translate and used the sentence for 4 gray cats. And I hope that Anton is with us and confirming that I've written it correctly. But again, as you can see, even though I asked for 4 cats, I got 3. So this is a large model. It's not as large as DALL-E, but it still has 1.3 billion parameters. The parameters indicates the complexity of the model. So these models cannot count past 3. That's the present stage, the existing limitation. Now, what is most scaring for most of us, trying to use these on scale, when we talk about scale, we have to think about hundreds or thousands, okay? That's the scale. Because if you're talking about, less than 500, well, that's not really a scale. We can still have a human in between. But if we have to go, to the 1,000 or, above the 500, then we have a scale that requires a machinery that understands what's going on there. So here we have an example with Jurassic 1, where I trained the model with a few examples of a statement being either negative or positive. And here we can see that it's very bad, because when I write, I'm a black person, automatically says negative. Well, I mean, that's scary, because that's how these models have been trained. But imagine, for someone doing our job of creating content on scale, how terrible it can be if we do something like that. I mean, it is pretty bad. So we need to work on that to prevent it. So just to wrap it up and provide a little bit of context, we can program this language model, which are text-to-text based, using natural language. And that's beautiful, because everyone can really create content on scale, okay? And hi, Alessia. Okay, I can see people coming in. Hi, Dave. So here we have a zero-shot implementation. That's where we tap immediately directly into the model without providing any example, and we just make a query, and then we expect to get an answer. And this is a very basic example, but it works. And then we have the case where we provide more samples to the models, and we instruct the model on understanding what type of output we expect to obtain. And so this is called few shots implementation, which is what we will share today in some of the demos. But if we want to obtain a higher level of quality, and of course, quality means factual correctness, and of course, similar tone of voice that you want to achieve with that type of content. Then you want to go in fine tuning, and then you want to provide hundreds of samples to the model and try to instruct it to understand more what type of content you're trying to get. And so here you can see that we can use these different ways of approaching a language model in different use cases. So Jason will definitely go on and we'll try to create a presentation for a description for a brand persona. And then we will try to ask Jason, what challenges he has already in doing that. Frequently asked question, it's something that we have been experiencing quite a lot in the past months. Title tag generation, it's also something that I'm planning to bring into WordLift, because I believe that it can, help the editor get some ideas or suggestion. And then, of course, search intent classification. It's something that now it's also embedded in major tools like SEMrush. You provide a query, and then you want to understand, what type of intent is behind the query. So this is another of these magical tools that we can use in SEO. So this is an examples of what we were able to generate what I was able to generate with just a few shots, and then I'll leave it to Jason and to Giovanni to take it from here and to highlight what's the process behind it, because of course, as briefly said, it's not just about getting on and generating content on scale. There is a lot more.
Right, brilliant, wonderful stuff. I mean, I absolutely love that presentation and the way it's you explain all of that, and the idea of one shot, zero shot, one shot, and multi-shot. I can't remember what the third one was. Building that up. I mean, I was very naive, and I thought it would be relatively simple to feed the machine and then get the results, and that simply isn't the case. Dave Davis was telling me yesterday that he works with machine learning programmers, and they spend 90% of their time cleaning data and then 10% doing the fun stuff, which is a bit like a footballer who spends a tiny amount of their time actually playing the matches, and the rest of it is training and really boring in the rain, running up and down and heading footballs at the wall or something like that. So it isn't all glamour, and it is an awful lot of application. Giovanni, has that been your experience working with this?
Yeah, actually, in our opinion, in my opinion, there are lots of complexity in doing this activity, especially on product description. I can assume that for sure there will be not just one or two or three person working on this activity, but for sure a good result can be achieved only thanks to a collaboration for the SEO team, from the technology provider, from the product team, as you think as an e-commerce, a big e-commerce that is working on thousands of products, and last but not least, from the content team. In my opinion, for sure, every product description must have a unique tone of voice, should reflect the tone of voice of the brand that you're working on, and for sure needs to have the all correct informations, because if you think at I don't know, shoes, you should have inside the product description all correct information about these shoes. If you think, for example, at running shoes, you should try to explain why those shoes are good for running and not for mountain, for hiking, or for other sports.
Right, and kind of, you were talking about teams, and you've had most experience, I think, from the three of us with this. Is you have a team cleaning the data you push into the model, or you prepare for the model so the model understands what it is you're looking. You mentioned the brand tone of voice, so you push in loads and loads of descriptions to teach the machine what it is we're expecting. You then do the small bit, which is teaching the machine, writing the machine learning algorithm. Then it spits out these descriptions, but you have to have a human team to check that it hasn't spat out rubbish.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I think that every team should check its part. I mean, the SEO team should check for keywords and related keywords for the product. Content team should work on grammar, should work on tone of voice, while the product team needs to be sure that inside the product description have been inserted all correct informations.
Right, and for you, Andrea, the importance of that clean data coming in, I mean, that's basically the be-all and end-all. Without clean data, you've got nothing.
That's the starting and the end. I mean, the organizational aspect of creating these models, it's massive, and the importance of it, it's usually underestimated, because of course we are attracted by the magic of releasing pressure from the content team, which of course is under a lot of pressure. Why content teams are under a lot of pressure? Because of course we have a lot of surfaces that we need to serve, and as we get more into personalization and conversational interfaces, we are presenting the product to different target audiences. And maybe it's the same product, but we have to present it with different tone of voice, as Giovanni was saying. So the pressure on generating, an enormous amount of content, it's very high. But at the same time, it's not a one-off. And that's one aspect that we have to learn. And a lot of the people that have been working in internationalization know that already, that when you start generating content because you want to translate, let's say, that product description into another language, or when you want to generate a product description like we're doing in the case that Giovanni explained, you are setting up a workflow. You're not creating one model and then it's done, because the model needs to be receptive of the changes inside the organization as quick as possible in order to be helpful for the organization itself.
Right. And so kind of, and the other question I had was, you basically, let's say you create your 200 descriptions, you push them into the machine, you do your machine learning model, it then spits this out, you check the stuff, and then do you push that content you've corrected back into the model so that it learns where it got it wrong, or is that an unreasonable way of working?
Yeah, I mean, you need more than 200. So
dearie me, I was hoping it would be 200.
Well, I mean, I ask you to curate at least 200, but then we have to work a lot more. So we use a mixed approach of few shots and even empty prompts generation. Empty prompts means that I can grasp information from your web pages automatically and try to get more content into the model in order to fit with the right tone of voice. I mean, if you look back at the description that I was presenting you before, which have been done with a few shots for the Prada bag. I don't know if we can bring that on.
We can show it back on screen, yeah, because I can't remember what the description looked like.
Right. If you look at these stuff, it sounds okay-ish, right? But probably Giovanni would kind of kill at least one of the three, and that's normal, and that's how it works. So for how good it sounds, it's still not perfect to fit the actual need.
So Giovanni, is it a good idea to say, right, let's produce 3, we pick 1, we correct it, and we use that? Is that reasonable?
Yeah, actually, yes. Because the main challenge is to generate a unique description for each product variation. So the example that Andrea just provided for sure are good examples. We can also try to use one of these 3 descriptions inside an e-commerce. But if you think that you should create a product description for other variation for this bag, the complexity, of course, raise up. So that's why what I said, it's important to have on board all teams inside the process, because, okay, a bag can differ from another one just for, I don't know, not only color, but material or something else, or small details. If you would like to communicate these details inside a product description and let an AI to create it a description, you should for sure have the team on board from product point of view, of course.
So I mean, basically the machine learning is just kind of pre-chewing the work to make it easier and simpler. And from my perspective, I'm looking at it and thinking, criticizing something that exists is much easier than filling the blank sheet of paper. And the machine is playing the role of giving me something to criticize as a human being and say, well, that's rubbish, and then rewriting the bits that are bad. And it just saves me from that blank sheet of paper and that the time it takes to actually fill up the first time. Is that fair, Andrea?
Yeah, it is fair. Also, currently, we are limited by the existing architecture because
Right.
The networks that we're using are basically starting from scratch every time. Even though we use a technique called transfer learning, which means that we tap into a vast knowledge that has been acquired by having the model reading zillion of web pages. That's not really what we need for that specific task. So we have to be SEOs in these. We have to think like SEO would do, like a human would do, which means that you have to start from understanding the target audience first. But the model doesn't understand the target audience, so you have to instruct it in understanding who you're talking to, by creating samples or by, providing a specific meta instruction, which of course we use a lot, especially in the phase in which we are creating these training data sets. And then these instructions can be something like, write these with a tone of voice of, a doctor, or write these for a teenager in LA. And these, we saw that it can activate some, it will kind of change the weights of the model, and then it will produce an output that it gets closer to what we expect. But the existing architecture is still limited. So that's why Jeff Dean is introducing something called, from Google, is introducing something called pathways, which is this, tremendous new way of creating models that can accomplish multiple tasks. Here, we're still in a phase where, we just want to have a model that can create, product descriptions for, let's say, all the bags on an e-commerce shop. But what we're going towards is a richer architecture with the ability to do multiple tasks, because then then we will see also that this value will increase as we move forward.
By multiple tasks, do you mean multiple tones of voice, or multiple product types, or multiple shops?
Multiple tasks, it means that you can, do well the Q&A on the product, but also do well the product description, but also maybe generate, a potential image for the advertising of the product. So multiple tasks means that it becomes intelligent at a general level.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that. In fact, you would need 3 different models, one for the description, one for the FAQ, and one for the image, and one model that does all. How far away is that, do you think?
I mean, Jeff Dean seems to be pretty confident, but at the moment, there are a lot of technical issues. And of course, in the industry, these are all aspects that are very clear. We need to have more efficient models, because at the moment, we kind of restart from scratch every time, and that's not really efficient. And also, these networks are very dense, which means that we have to activate a lot of parts of the networks, and that's not really efficient, also in terms of energy consumption. So there are a lot of concern in the industry, and Jeff Dean is highlighting a way forward. How long it's going to take? Hopefully not too much. I think in a couple of years, we should get there.
Right, and slightly ironic that Google should be providing the means for us to actually write all this great SEO content. But you mentioned there the FAQs, and that brings us nicely to Giovanni. You've actually been working on FAQs. I can't imagine how an FAQ for a product page written by a machine would work. How do you find the questions, and how do you tell the machine how to answer?
Yeah, actually, it was a project that we worked together with WorldLift on one of our Luxottica e-commerce, and we worked on contact lenses. Actually, contact lenses is a difficult market. Especially in US, because you need to convince a user to purchase a product that he have to put inside their eyes online. So this is a very, let's say, delicate process to manage. And actually, especially on SEO, on which the competition online is higher, is very high on contact lenses, we actually found a way to provide the useful content to the users directly on the Google result pages, and actually also to obtain a better ranking in terms of positions for relevant keywords. Another advantage is that we as SEO team saw was that basically inside the FAQ you can insert links, for example, internal links, and as soon as you go to mark up these FAQs with schema.org structured data, you can also have more links inside the Google result page. So this is a very big opportunity for sure. Also in this case, you need a human check, because you can select with machines most searched questions, you can generate answer with relevant keywords, but you need, especially for, I don't know, for contact lenses sector, a human check for the effectiveness of the information that you are inserting and generating with AI.
So you're finding the questions by looking at Google and seeing what questions are turning up and people also ask. And that was where I kind of stuck. I thought, how can a machine possibly give us the answer? Because it doesn't have culture and knowledge and understanding. As you said earlier on, it doesn't know what it's talking about. Explain that to me, Andrea. How does the machine actually come up with an answer to a question when it doesn't have any understanding of what it's actually saying?
Yeah, so we use basically two techniques. One is to tap into something like GPT-3, but specifically for this use case, we trained a model which is Google T5, and we trained this model for that specific piece of content in order to summarize the results that we get from Google itself.
Right.
So we have this tool that generates the content by reading the SERP on a specific query, and then creating a snippet of text. We played with that a while ago, Jason, if you remember.
Yeah.
But now we got a little bit better, and then of course also, again, it's not just the technology. The technology is a tiny bit, if you want. I mean, it's the workflow that makes the difference, because there, as Giovanni explained, I mean, well, first of all, we have to find the relevant questions. Then we have to understand what are the pages that, you know, we want to revamp or improve with, you know, with this additional content. Now, these are very specific SEO tasks that we need to design with, you know, an SEO idea of some sort, and then we can automate with you know, whatever procedure. But the key is understanding what are the pages where I need to do this work, and what are the questions that will fit with these pages. And we can look at the people also ask, but we can also look at the queries that we receive on these pages in order to see if there is something that it's there, but we're not serving it properly. And then we want to, you know, start generating content and let, you know, the team review it, you know, on batches, so that, you know, with a few clicks, they would say, okay, go. And then we want to, you know, of course, enrich it with structured data markup, add the internal links that we need. So, I mean, it's a process, you know, it's not if I use T5 or if I use Pegasus or if I use, you know, the model is a tiny bit of the flow.
Right. I mean, there's an awful lot of human input here, with the machine just allowing it to scale to a certain level. But Giovanni, because you have to check everything and then correct it and feed it back potentially into the model, an awful lot of human beings involved, teams involved, an awful lot of organization. How do you organize the teams?
Hopefully less.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but actually,
excuse me. I'm kind of going down the hole of thinking. At the beginning, I was thinking it's all the machines. Now I'm thinking it's all the humans.
yeah, actually, the human part is more relevant than actually someone can imagine. But I just want to say something before that. As soon the most you work on this activity, the less you need to check, because of course you are training the machine, the artificial intelligence. So you the workflow and the workload is less after couple of activities. But in general, for sure, there will be also in this case an SEO check in order to be consistent in terms of keywords, in terms of FAQs that you are selecting, in terms of structured data, and also, but not least, internal links. Please also note that if you mark up the questions with structured data, you can also be present inside Google Assistant. So if someone asks for a question that you have marked and that you are positioning well inside the Google pages, you can also be inside the Google Assistant. And the team is organized basically with the check for SEO, we check for from the content team, so about the tone of voice, that, for example, in the project that we worked together with World Lift was a medical check and medical tone of voice, let's say. And of course, we need also check from the team that knows about contact lenses and this particular product. I mean.
Brilliant stuff. And one thing as well, I've been asking all the questions that I've got. The audience, if you want to ask a question, please do. I see that Alessia's asked a question about, do we have any data to performance of content created with generators as compared to humans? And apparently images, those cats look very bizarre. I do agree with it. It looked like they've got a strange eye problem. Have you got any data for that, Andrea?
Yeah, I mean, we do have data, head-to-head comparison with human written content. No, I mean, not enough probably, but we have data about the number of clicks that we are able to generate with these automatically generated FAQs, and it's pretty significant. Right. I mean, we're talking about thousands of additional clicks for pages that do have value in e-commerce. And it's not just, of course, the cases that we discussed with Giovanni, but we have experimented with these also in other verticals, and it's working well. The main issue, of course, is that how well can we plug this into the existing publishing workflow? That's the challenge.
Yeah, no, that is a challenge, and one part of that is going to be building an internal knowledge graph, which we'll come back to. But before that, I really wanted to dig into the SEO aspects of it, which is the pragmatic reason we're looking at this in the first place, and ask a double-headed question, partly to you, Giovanni, what are the benefits, and then to you, Andrea, what are the fears? What are the potential pitfalls? So, Giovanni, what are the benefits you've been getting from the FAQ and the description written by machine learning?
Yeah, about the FAQ, actually, I think that the main benefits are to get more space inside the Google Pages, because as soon as you trigger the FAQ rich result, you can actually have more space inside the Google Pages. Another one is that you can be present also inside the people also ask with your pages or product listing pages. And another benefits that I see from this activity is actually an increase of impressions that you can generate. Impression, because of course with a single search you can actually trigger 4 free links if you insert internal links inside the FAQ, and actually you can help users to go directly to the page that he or she prefer. So for sure the quality of traffic is improved thanks to this activity, and that's it in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a really good point about the fact that people are getting increasingly from the SERP through the site links and the people also ask and the FAQ markup, the FAQs within the results, getting straight to the part of the page they want to go to. And that's something that we shouldn't underestimate moving forward. But what are the big pitfalls, Andrea? What scares you most about doing this?
So a few things. One thing is, of course, being non-tactical, right? Because when we think about content generation, we can think about so many different areas where it can be applied. And I'm just reading now the question by Rick Post, where to start, because that's one of the biggest fears, that you do all of these and it takes it's human intensive. It's not just the machine. So we have teams involved, and then it doesn't work because maybe we are not tactical enough. Now, being tactical in these first experiences, as Giovanni was saying, has been about focusing on a specific feature like FAQ that did have significant value inside the Google ecosystem, because of course it triggers the answer in the Google Assistant, but then it can also become people also ask part of the people also ask, but then also, it can even show a link on the SERP. I mean, it does have a significant value that, and why it has that value, because also Google is keen on getting, its model trained and getting more knowledge in a conversational form, because more people are coming to search with questions that don't have an answer. And so, by providing this visibility, then, we can work more and create more content, and kind of it's a virtuous loop. Of course, it's a very delicate balance, as we know.
Right.
But,
well, that actually makes you think of I mean, you were saying to start with something specific like an FAQ or product descriptions or whatever it might be, start with one thing and test that. But one thing is that there are a lot of questions out there that simply don't have an answer. And this is a great place, I would imagine, to start, because that would tend to be long tail, so it's not so risky, maybe. So, I mean, I was doing knowledge panel for a person. Then I thought, what about knowledge panel for a singer, knowledge panel for an author, knowledge panel for an artist, knowledge panel for a rock star? And all of those answers are slightly different. And Google at the minute is just providing one answer to all of them. It's the same. And in fact, there are subtle differences. And that, for me, would be a great place for me to start, because I can address these different markets with their very specific question.
Yeah.
Can you build me a model, please, Andrea?
Ready? Yes. I like.
Sorry, that was a joke. Yeah. So, I mean, would that be a fair way to start the long tail? Take less risk.
It is. It is definitely because also you want to build your own competence knowledge, which can be encoded into the model. But I mean, again, even if it's artificial, you still want to make it specific and valuable for the end user. So you don't want to just go off and get, the PAA, because I mean, people also ask in most cases are, already have beautiful answer. So in these cases, they are relevant only if they fit well with the content that you have on the page. So you really want to also make sure that you create a relevant link between the page where you're adding this content and the queries that this page is already attracting.
Right. And what I've been seeing with people also ask is that, I mean, I've been testing on the blue dog and the yellow koala as per usual. And I've basically created answers to questions that I know nobody's asking, because nobody cares about the blue dog except me. And Google will give you a people also ask for a question that nobody is actually asking, just because it's found the answer. For example, how old is Boo-Wah? Nobody cares. And I gave it the answer, Boo-Wah is 10, which may or may not be true. But, I created Boo-Wah, so it's true. Nobody can contradict me. But nobody, I would imagine, is asking that question. But simply because Google found the answer and could understand it, had found the answer, it started providing that as a question when you search for Boo-Wah. So does that have any value? I mean, I'm wasting my time other than the experiment.
I think it does a lot. It has a lot of value there.
Jolly good.
I think you proved that. I mean, you should be sleep relaxed. I mean, you're creating a lot of value with this experiment, because you're helping us understand the way in which the machine is thinking, and also you're helping us understand that the machine it's working in a way that is similar to what we should do.
Right.
So my thinking is always like when you make this experiment and we can see these panels that are becoming richer, I want to think, okay, what is Google using? How can I use these on my site? Why can I use these on a category page? Why can I I cannot use the same mechanism that Google is using for generating that answer on my personal site, on my commerce, right. That's kind of the logic.
Well, another thing I think actually kind of now we're talking about it is I think I have developed an authority for myself about Boo-Wah, the blue dog, simply by answering questions around the dog, even though people aren't answering those questions. Google's saying this must be authority, which is why I've got all those knowledge panel descriptions. We've got now, for information, anybody who's watching, the entire happy families of the blue dogs and the yellow koalas with descriptions from my own site in the knowledge panel. And I think that's kind of building up this authority with this. In fact, it was manual writing. But in fact, that brings me to my next question, which is one of the plans I have is to use machine learning to write descriptions for entities, people, companies, because my clients at Kalicube do it very, very badly. Writing a description for an entity involves being both simple, factual, in the right order, not overselling everything, and yet being attractive to the user. And that's a really difficult balance to get. And most people don't manage to get it. And the small test I did, it just made up facts. I mean, at one point it was saying that I had owned a company that made $5 million a year, which simply isn't true. And it said that I had worked with Gary at Google, which is not true either. So how am I going to get around that, Andrea? You've coached me a little bit. Can you tell me some of that?
Yeah, I mean, my answer is always to have the knowledge graph in place, because the knowledge graph it's the single source of truth where you can get back to validate. So I think that one of the process that we need to have in place when we look at content generation, and if someone starts and saying, I'm going to generate content for your site, is always, the right question is, how are you going to validate the factual correctness? How are you going to validate, if the the text is not going to contain expression that are forbidden in our context, in our environment? I don't know, Giovanni, what can you say about things that cannot be said? Because I mean, that's an important aspect, that there are, when we produce content, there are rules that a content writers needs to follow, and we need the machine to follow the same rules.
Yeah. Actually, this is a good point. In fact, one of my biggest fear is, let's say, in generate at scale content with AI, is something that you already mentioned at the beginning. So the possibility that a text can be perceived or seen by minorities as offensive. So for sure, there are lots of things that we cannot do, and that you should train. You should try to train the machine, the model, to don't say particular things, because as if I think as my experience in a big company, I should try to preserve the let's say the authority of my company. So if I let the product description generates thousands of descriptions, I need to be sure that everything is correctly in place.
Right. So that's the big topic of the validation. And back to your answer, Jason, I mean, you have already the knowledge graph in place for the entities that you are dealing with. So that's the starting point, because the validation will use this data constantly, and we'll get the text that has been generated, and then we'll look at it, and then it will make questions to the text and try to get answers by the text, and then it will look at the answers that are extracted by this question, and then it will validate against the knowledge graph.
Right, yeah, and that kind of comes back to the knowledge graph, and Google's understanding of the world through the knowledge graph becomes fundamental to everything, because that's how it's fact-checking. So part of our jobs, and luckily for me with Kalicube, is making sure the facts in the knowledge graph are correct in order for it to actually correctly fact-check when it's looking at what we're writing around ourselves, and other people, for that matter, are writing about our entities, our company, ourselves, our records, our blue dogs, or whatever it might be.
Cool.
Yeah. Oh, great. And one last thing. I mean, it struck me as you were talking for the FAQ. Basically, what you're saying is you're scraping Google using Google's technology to rewrite and summarize Google's own SERPs, and then throw it back at Google and expect Google to put it at the top. How can you justify that in terms of expecting to win? I mean, isn't that too simple?
Well, as we say, I mean, there is a lot of human labor in between that justifies why we get to the top. And yeah, I mean, John Mueller, we had a kind of a debate on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. It was super nice as usual, in following on a case of a web story that didn't get indexed in the first place. And then when I wrote that partially was automatically generated as most of the content that we produced, then John said, why are you wasting my time? I mean, he didn't say this rude, but he say, why are you wasting our time and limited resources in looking at something if it has been generated? Yes, Alessia, remember that. I mean, we had an interesting thread there. Well, the reality is that then we demonstrated also to John that regardless of the fact that the content can be automatically generated, it does rank. Okay, but it only ranks if it's useful. Or I mean, in our view of Google, which is still respectful for the time being, or to some extent, it will rank because it's bringing value. And the reason it's bringing value is because there is a human behind a knowledge graph, or human behind the training data, that it's infusing the intention to that piece of content.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing I was wondering is, I mean, talking to Fabrice Canel, who is Mr. Bingbot, who's basically built Bingbot, he's very, very keen on the idea of stopping spam and automatically generated content right at the beginning before it's even indexed, and using the Bingbot machine learning to exclude not only content that it considers to be useless or non-relevant, but also not even to follow links that it feels are non-relevant. Is there not a danger that we're falling into that trap?
Well, I mean, again, why would a brand like Ray-Ban accept to use automatically generated content if it's not helpful for its consumer? I mean, it gets even before Bing and Google. I think when you publish something on your site, I mean.
No. Sorry. I mean, actually, that does bring it back to like the brands, which is Giovanni's space, is saying you're actually generating the content to help the user and placing it on the page for the user, and then packaging it for Google and Bing. Is that more or less correct?
Yeah, actually, we should think as a, let's say, a more 360 view, because you are not generating only content for Google. Or for SEO, you are generating content also for shopping campaigns, for example, because you can be more consistent inside the Google shopping SERP. So providing specific descriptions. You can also try to push these descriptions inside the shopping aggregator and working on affiliation. So there is more than SEO about this kind of work. For sure, the value is that you can generate also unique content.
Right. Yeah. So I think Andrea's laughing because he saw Dave Davis say, "Do we have to think about humans too now?" Which is kind of, I think, it's an ironic comment, and interesting enough, and importantly, machines that are writing this content have no sense of irony, no sense of humor, no sense of poetry, and, as you said, no sense of understanding. And they can't count beyond 3, which I find astonishing. I mean, is there a reason they can't count beyond 3?
Well, there are multiple reasons for that, but I think in terms of poetry, I might disagree with you.
Oh, right, okay.
So I mean, they can generate great poetry.
Sorry, but can they understand great poetry?
It depends on what you mean by understanding. I mean,
right. We're getting philosophical.
It's always about the definition of intelligence. That's the main problem. How do we define intelligence? Because if we agree on a general definition, then we can understand how we assess these tools in a different way. I think right now we also currently lack the method of understanding what is intelligent content, for an e-commerce site, for instance, and what is content that serves the purpose of the user. Sometimes it's very hard also for humans to understand, is this content relevant or not relevant? I mean, it's interesting that Olesi asked about, did you compare human with machine? We should start doing that. I don't see really kind of the two as separated. I see that it's a tandem, and it's working fantastically together, and it wouldn't be possible otherwise, because of course, if we remove the machine with all the need of content that we have, it would be really impossible to keep our site tidy and clean and valuable.
Yeah, I mean, you talk a lot about humans dancing with machines or machines dancing with humans, which I love. And I mean, one thing about poetry that actually occurred to me, I suppose what I mean by that is poetry is by nature, open to interpretation. And one thing that perhaps you don't want, especially for a product description or an FAQ, are things, Giovanni, that are open to interpretation. You need to be relatively pragmatic, relatively simple, both for the machine and, as Dave Davis said, we do need to think about them from time to time, your customers.
Yes, exactly. But I think that this point can be, let's say, resolved thanks to the majority of samples that you can provide to the artificial intelligence. So, I would like to be more poetry. I would like a special tone of voice. I need to serve to the machine lots of examples of what I need.
Right.
So,
and one thing that did strike me as well is, isn't one great advantage of all this that you can actually, you mentioned it earlier, Giovanni, keep a consistent tone of voice. You define the tone of voice, and if you have 50 employees, it's quite difficult to maintain a consistent tone. With a machine, with employees simply correcting the machine, isn't that tone of voice easier to maintain?
Yeah, but actually I think that all effective tone of voice has a guidelines. So for sure you will define guidelines before to start to work on product description generation or FAQs. So as soon as the team has defined the tone of voice guidelines and what you can see and what you cannot, what you can say and what you cannot say, you have let's say lots of instructions for the machine.
Right. And I mean, there's another example of somewhere that you could use machine learning very easy, is step-by-step instructions.
Yep.
Would that, I mean, but you would need, I mean, but obviously you would need a data source, you would need to build a knowledge graph. I mean, you were talking earlier on about scraping web pages. That's incredibly dangerous in the sense that web pages are very messy. So you need to build a knowledge graph. To what extent do you have to have a knowledge graph in order to be able to actually start generating content this way?
So a knowledge graph, it's a repository of data that possibly it's both human and machine validated. I mean, not always happens that you have both. Sometimes it's just a basic machine check. In some other cases, you have an interaction. But you need to store this knowledge because, I mean, for instance, if you have to generate a how-to instructions and you need to know exactly, that the instruction that you're providing are correct. And so you need a base where you check, like, the example of the president of the United States. I mean, I need to be able to get back on that entity and say, is it a vice president or is the president? I need to have a single source of truth in my workflow. When I do AI, I need to have this single source of truth as an input or as an output. So in this workflow, we're using it both as an input for kind of creating the set of features that the model will use for generating the description, but then we also use it as output because it's going to be, the part of the validation process of the generated content.
Right, and that aspect of time in a knowledge graph as well is something I think a lot of us overlook, is that Joe Biden was vice president, he is now president, and basically if you just go through his career and start at the beginning and move forwards, you would stop at vice president and output that. And one advantage of having a knowledge graph is you can maintain your knowledge graph. Presumably, Giovanni, you can then update your FAQ and your descriptions much more efficiently and effectively.
Sorry, Jason, I didn't get the question.
That if you maintain a knowledge graph with the changes over time, you can actually update the FAQs and the descriptions to reflect reality much more easily than with a human team, if I may say.
Yeah, actually, because you can let a machine do the job for you, but actually you need only to review the work. So you can also update frequently the content of your page, and especially inside teams that are working on e-commerce, you don't have so much capacity to work on this type of activities. That's why the artificial intelligence is
brilliant. So can we end then with where all this is going next for each of you? I mean, Giovanni, without giving us away any trade secrets about where you're actually taking your strategy, where do you think this is going to push in the next couple of years?
That's a very good question. Actually, in my opinion, in next 2 years, for sure, there will be, in my opinion, a more consistent usage of artificial intelligence to produce text. I don't know if related to the e-commerce and SEO, but for sure there will be a massive usage of this technology. I hope that the fine-tuning and the fine-tuning for e-commerce will be, let's say, developed as much as possible during the next 2 years, because there are lots of opportunities. Otherwise, you should have 100 copywriters to generate unique product description for e-commerce.
Right. Yeah. And one thing you said, Andrea, before you answer that question is we're going to end up bringing together the models that will be able to write multiple parts or create multiple parts of the content all in one go with one common thread. And once again, consistency, not only across the platform, but also within the page itself, across the image, the title, the description, and the FAQ. And Bill Swasey saying structure in time, a source for world vectors, two dots, and I don't know what that means. Do you know what that means, Andrea?
That's a tricky one. I'll leave this to Jason.
So where do you think we're going in the next couple of years, Andrea? Where are you going in the next couple of years?
Yeah, so in the next couple of years, very clearly, we're working on 2 areas. One is multimodality, because of course, this idea of handling multiple senses. We look at a product and we read, the description, but we also look at, the photos of the product and vice versa. So currently we are text only, right? So, but we are starting to work with this new experiment of multimodal search engines, where we get the data from the graph and get the, images from the graph, and then build these models that can work together. So multimodality is one. And the other one that we're starting to experiment with is as we create more possibly, hopefully relevant FAQ content for these websites, what we're starting to create is these prototypes of chatbots that can use this content for creating conversational experiences. And so we have now a couple of projects where we're working on and kind of reusing again, hopefully with more cats. Dave Davies has sent another comment. Hopefully, images are still pretty bad, as someone else was pointing out. But understanding image is what I meant. Multimodality in the sense of kind of being able to understand that that's a product bag that suits for that specific outfit that you have, and I can see also Bill. So multimodality and kind of building these conversational interfaces out of the existing FAQ, because again, we always think it's for Google. It is not for Google. It's for the it's for the human behind Google, but it's also for ourselves. So if we generate this relevant content that answer everything about contact lenses, shouldn't we be able to create an experience on our site which kind of fulfill the need of someone that wants to know everything about contact lenses, because we do have that knowledge within that brand on contact lenses. So that's the 2 areas where I see we're going.
Brilliant. Absolutely wonderful. I just looked up the thing that Bill was talking about, and I looked it up on Google, strangely enough, and I read the feature snippet, and I still don't understand. Not that part, Anton. I understood that part. It was the first one about structure in time. I'll look it up afterwards, learn it, figure it out, and then have a chat with Bill about it so he can explain it to me so I actually do properly understand it, as usual. And I'll tell you where we're going personally with Kalicube in the next couple of years is we're going to be writing these entity descriptions, because I'm absolutely convinced that this is the single most important part of building your entity in Google's brain and educating Google. And the second part is we're really bad at it as human beings, because we're egocentric, because we think about things in a chronological order from beginning to end rather than from end to beginning, talking about what we're doing now rather than what we were doing when we were 3 years old or 5 years old or 20 years old. And for example, me not talking about the blue dog all the time, but talking about digital marketing all the time and saying that's what I am today, that's what you're interested in today if you are my audience. So Kalicube is going to figure out, thanks to WordLift as well, with Andrea's help, how to write entity descriptions so that Google can understand it and can nail our place in the knowledge graph. Thank you very much. That was absolutely delightful. I really loved talking to you, Giovanni, listening to everything you had to share, and Andrea as well. Thank you, Anton, behind the scenes. Thank you to everybody watching and listening. And there'll be another one next month. Have you got anything to say goodbye, Andrea and Giovanni?
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao a tutti.
See you next month for